Hello and welcome to our Facebook Live Q&A with Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall and the city's new innovation team. I'm your host, Poonam Kumar with SLC TV, Salt Lake City's Government Access Channel. Now today we're going to meet the new team members and learn what major projects they'll undertake and hear from the mayor about why she decided to launch this exciting new effort here in Salt Lake City. But before we get started, just know that if you've got questions for the panelists, you can drop them in the comment box below and we'll try and get to as many of those as we possibly can through the event. Now, Mayor, before we meet the team, let's start with you here. Now, last month, you delivered your second State of the City address where you announced the city's first ever innovation team. Let's talk a little bit about where this idea came from and maybe just kind of go into a little bit about how the process of bringing this new city function to life has gone for you.
Thanks, Poonam, and nice to see you, Sandy, Liz, and Noel, and the rest of the team. I have always been talking about tech and innovation. That's been a critical part of my vision for the city all along, but there's really no denying that 2020 completely changed the way we work as a city with the people that we serve. So last year created an opportunity and also highlighted the need for us in terms of improving our public transparency, streamlining inefficiencies that exist in City Hall, and promoting the use of data to drive our decisions as city government. And those needs, coupled with the fact that we have some of the most incredibly talented and visionary people working for us in Salt Lake City, made this the right moment for us to go after the creation of the team. So I'm excited to see them get to work. They've come together in record time. And in the short term, they're going to oversee the successful implementation of an integrated software system that is really going to be a game changer for how basic city functions like payroll and accounting operate, and make sure that they're doing it more cohesively and efficiently. That's what the system will do. It's something that the city's recognized for years and years and didn't quite have the ability to implement. But we've got the political will to do it, and now we have the structure through the innovation team to do it. They're also going to focus on continuing to build out our digital equity infrastructure and policy citywide, and that's just the jumping off point.
Thank you, Mayor. So it sounds like, really this is creating a culture of innovation here in the city. It's not just a team, it's more than that.
That's right. And government, I think at all levels, tends to silo, and partially because it's a corporation that's been working for over a century here to put Salt Lake City together and make sure it runs smoothly. But the innovation team also has that opportunity to unsilo in all of the efficiencies and the ways that they address ways for us to work better and serve better as your city government. So the innovation team, I see in a way as a disruptor team, a good disruptor team.
So now you've got pretty high hopes for this team. Now let's meet the team. Team, first off, congratulations to you all in your new role. And each of you, what's unique is that you've all been with the city for quite some time. So let's get to know you. Let's start with first having you each maybe introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your role and what it'll entail, and also just a little bit about your history and what led you to this position. Noel, let's get started with you first.
Okay. Hi, I'm Noel Walkinshaw, the new Chief Innovations Officer. In this role, I will be helping lead the team and into these new, really transformational projects that the city is taking on. And we've got a history of taking on big projects in Salt Lake City, and I believe being very successful. And so that'll be our initial role. The team will introduce themselves, but we're kind of a nice mix of technologists and people who have a good understanding of communications, a good understanding of policy development. And we're really kind of taking a very deliberative approach to having, policy and communication lead our technology so that we get us and stay focused on the objectives of the city.
No, let's talk a little bit about your background. I mean, you've been with the city for quite some time. Can you talk to the public here a little bit about your background and what led you to this position.
Well, I started as a weeds enforcement officer, a seasonal employee. And then I went to, in the 90s, boarded buildings were big. We didn't have a housing crisis in the same way. We had too many vacant houses. And I spent a lot of time working on housing and housing policy. And that was really where I started. And then I moved over to building services for a while. I managed the planning. I was a manager in the planning department for a while. And in planning, we started really wanting to do a lot with communications and public engagement. And so it was there that we sort of set the seeds for our civic engagement team, which we later formed. And also it was in that role that we worked on our open data and our transparency policies. And so we spent a lot of time setting those policies in place and setting that team in place. And I supported that team for a number of years before moving to public services, where I have been for the last little while as a deputy director of administrative services, focusing on business systems within public services and really trying to help public services change how we do business.
So Noel, it sounds like you'll be taking, oh yes, Mayor.
Can I just chime in that Noel did a really good job of walking you through some of the roles he's held, but he didn't do anything to tell you that he's one of the most brilliant people in Salt Lake City, period. And whenever there's some like difficult intersection, be it policy or from an organizational and a systems perspective, the city has gone to Noel in all these different roles, and it's obvious by his progression through the city over a couple decades. We go to Noel and go, what should we do? How do you crack this code? He also can write code, not just from a metaphoric standpoint. So good job being humble, Noel, but you didn't say anything about how brilliant you are. So I'll have to do that for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, kudos to you, Noel. And here's the thing, you're going to be taking all of this knowledge, right? This wealth of knowledge you have from so many different backgrounds and bringing it together to create some kind of strategy in this new innovation team. So I'm excited to hear more about, what you'll be doing and some of the projects you'll be working on. But let's change gears here real quick and let's move over here to you, Liz, and talk a little bit, introduce yourself, a little bit about your background and sort of what led you to your position here today.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Bueller. I don't have as deep of a bench as Noel for Salt Lake City experience, but I have been with the city for 10 years in a lot of different capacities, from the planning division to working in housing and neighborhood development, and the past 4 years as the city's civic engagement manager. And what I'm really excited about in each of those roles, I got to work with great teams who really cared about applying new best practices in their fields to city projects to improve the city for the better. So I'm really excited with this new innovations team because we really get to do that citywide. We get to tackle the projects, the top of the mayor's priorities, and apply those new best practices. So again, we keep improving the city, making it a better place to live and to work.
Thank you, Liz. And now, as the innovations team lead, what are some of the things that, what will your role entail?
So I'm going to be the innovation team lead, and I'm really working with the team and supporting departments in this new innovation. So we don't expect every city department, every city employee to be up on the latest things in project management and change management, but we're here to support them so we can apply these principles across the city.
Thank you, Liz. And moving over here now to Sandy. Hi, Sandy. Let's talk a little bit about your role and what it'll entail.
Yeah, so I'm actually probably the freshest of the group because I don't have as deep a bench of as Noel or Liz. I actually came to the city in April 2019, again, one of the freshest. Prior to that, though, I was actually a program manager and policy analyst at a government think tank for about 8 years. So these skills really did come in handy when I transitioned to the mayor's office a couple of years ago. And recently I've assisted with the chief of staff with, all of our projects. So I've kind of gotten a feel for the city that way because of my role with the chief of staff. And I also managed the mayor's board appointments and then was eventually tapped to work on implementing that new integrated software system, which was a great opportunity. Thank you, Mayor. with Noel and Liz, because that, you know, jumped off to this innovation team, which I'm very happy to be a part of. And really in each of these roles that I've had, whether, you know, in my past life or my life here at the city, I was essentially a problem solver, right? Which is why I'm super excited to be part of this team, because we're here to focus on tackling some of the city's most pressing problems, you know, through data and working collaboratively with all of our departments. My role as a senior innovation consultant, I'll work closely with Liz and Noel in assisting all the city departments to research, you know, identify, implement strategies that will ultimately increase transparency and streamline services to residents. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for, is to make, you know, our residents' lives easier. My particular focus will be on applying, you know, change management principles and effective engagement tools to ensure project success. And then we also have a fourth colleague who I'll be working closely with on project implementation. And then, you know, for our first major project, actually the software implementation, she led on the documenting and realigning of the city's business processes. So we work in tandem together in our different skill sets.
Thank you so much, Sandy. And yeah, although you might have, you know, newer and fresher perspectives, we've got Noel and Liz here. This is a good variation. I mean, Mayor, this is this team right here. This is exciting. And honestly, this extensive knowledge and background is going to come in handy for the work that you'll be doing as part of the innovations team. But now when we talk about innovation, you know, what comes up and what we're hearing a lot, especially prior to the pandemic and even more so now, we heard a lot about digital equity and the digital divide. Now, Mayor, I want to turn this over to you for a second. And digital equity, what does that truly mean for the city? And what are like city's goals to make tech and innovation more accessible, you know, for the city?
Yeah, we've known that there are areas of the city that don't have access to high-speed internet. And there's absolutely areas, individuals, families throughout the city who can't afford access to high-speed internet if they have the infrastructure to do it. But 2020, as crises do, and I think the entire year of 2020 really put a spotlight on our digital divide that we've known was there, but hadn't done as much, I think, as we can as a city government to try to bridge. So even after the pandemic is behind us, access to high-speed internet is going to continue to be a critical role in people's ability just to fully participate in society, to participate in school, in our democracy, in our economy. And so our digital equity efforts are intended to help reduce the barriers that people face financially and from an infrastructure perspective, just to access the internet. So in 2020, yes, there's dogs in my house. We did some pretty, we took some big steps, major strides. And I just want to give a shout out to Erin Bentley, who runs our city IMS team. I liken Erin to a 2-liter bottle of soda that you shook up, and we took the cap off of Erin in 2020, and he's like launching digital equity at warp speed. So maybe there was even Mentos in that bottle, but we worked really quickly when the pandemic started to bring all of our public engagement online. And in tandem with that, our teams worked tirelessly. They were incredible, working nights and weekends sometimes to try to decrease that digital divide so that more of our city residents could participate in city meetings without and city decision making without having to get in a car and risk their health. So we rolled out technology to expand internet access through these pop-up transmission sites, and we expanded our city's Wi-Fi connect to some of our city buildings like Sorensen Unity Center. So you could go sit in the parking lot in your car, or if it was nice enough, under one of the covered park picnic benches and do your schoolwork or access the internet there. We also partnered to get our city surplus computers into the hands of our school students in the city. That seems like a really easy no-brainer, but there's actually legal thresholds that kind of keep public entities from giving away public assets for the good of the community. So we've figured out ways that we could overcome that and get the computers into students' hands. We did pop-up work also to help people sign up for for essential services that they should access and could access online, and to help complete the census. And at the end of the year, we adopted and our council approved a citywide digital equity plan, and that'll help guide us as we move forward with this rocket of work on bridging that digital divide. And this team is going to take up those digital equity efforts as they, continue to push us forward, keep that momentum going, and narrow that digital divide that's still there in our city.
Mayor, thank you. That's quite a bit of efforts that came online thanks to just COVID, right? But there were some things that were in the works prior to that to try and address digital equity and the divide. And I'm not sure, Liz, do you want to chime in on that portion that, there were some things sort of leading up to this before 2020 hit? And then maybe from there, Noel, can we talk a little bit about just what else are we doing now moving forward? The mayor has laid out some of these efforts, but what are we doing moving forward to build more digital inclusion and equity to follow along with the mayor's goals?
Well, what I love working in Salt Lake is the city really cares about addressing digital equity, as the mayor was talking about, but we're just one organization that's really put in a lot of work the past few years. There's a great organization called Utah Communities Connect that we're a part of. And actually that entire organization, including folks from the Salt Lake City Library, the county library, our community partners, religious organizations, our state and county partners. We all came together and really thought about how can we address this and how can we each do our part to support and lower this digital divide. So it's actually this document that Noel has put a lot of work into. It came together as a community from multiple sessions with this group and reaching out to community leaders, community organizations that work with people day to day. That's really what turned into this policy. And that's why I'm so excited that the innovation team is within IMS and we get to work with Erin Bentley, because it really is, as the mayor was saying, the leadership he's showing in this, it gets us all excited to work on this and to really bring digital equity across Salt Lake City.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And yes, you're right. Like the community was very much involved in helping to drive some of these efforts and the things that you'll be working on. And for those that are out there or just joining us now, please send us questions. I mean, we've got an amazing group of panel members here. We've got the mayor. If you've got questions or thoughts, please send them through in the comment box below, and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can a little bit later. And Noel, let's go back to you real quick here and talk a little bit more about what are some of the other things that we're doing to build digital inclusion and equity for all here in the city.
Well, a big part of our work in 2020 was supporting, just flat out supporting the community. Before working here as part of my role in public services, youth and family services was one of the work groups that I supported. And we immediately went into setting up programs to support the folks that, needed help with online schooling, the kids in our community that needed help. And we worked with the state to get some funding and some grants, and we've been spinning up, I think we have around 375 students that we've been working with one-on-one to help them stay caught up and to help them be connected to the school, because it's not easy, right? It's not easy, especially if you don't have those capacities at home. So that was something that we did right out of the gate. And that's been a really, really great and successful program. A big part of that also has been, testing the policy that we have. The policy that we have really intends to give us the framework to guide our community policy, our community partnerships, so we can better leverage those, as well as those investments like that we've talked about that Erin is doing in that technology infrastructure, right? I mean, there's a mix of infrastructure and there's a mix of ability to access it through the hardware at home and just knowing how to plug in. I think over time, the digital equity will play a significant role in how we interpret our workforce development as a community, because the opportunity to bring our community up as we become more oriented around technology. And I feel like that our economic and our community development philosophies will be influenced by digital equity. And that was something that we really wanted to make sure was a part of our policy, is that we reflect bringing up the whole community and that opportunity, because the bridge is more than just having a keyboard to type into. It's really having those skills to enter the workforce. So that's an area where I would hope to see us continuing that conversation.
Thank you, Noel. And I know that you're still, this team is still fairly new and you're still kind of working on some of your plans of actions. But even when we talk about digital equity and just access to language, services and translations and things like that, I mean, is there anything that you might be able to share, or are there things that we're working towards to make sure that we are meeting these equity efforts beyond just sort of the digital side, but also looking at language, and which is also part of digital equity? Can you speak to that?
I can. I'm probably not the best person to speak about it. I'm going to kind of maybe defer over to Liz Bueller, because
She's got her hands raised.
I feel like she can see the answer in her face. And so let's have Liz talk.
Yes, Liz, thank you.
So obviously digital equity, that's something really important, but we won't get to full allowing all of our residents to have the same voice with addressing digital equity alone. So it's really about thinking about how the whole package of how do we reach our residents, how do we reach our constituents, and how do we allow them to participate in city decisions. So that can be ensuring more digital equity across the city, but it's also making sure that we're getting people materials in things that are easy to understand and in languages that people speak throughout Salt Lake City. English is not the only language spoken in Salt Lake City. So that's why there's a great team in engagement and communications trying to make sure that at minimum, we translate all public materials in Spanish and hopefully other languages as well, but also working, let's say a project affects people. We want to make sure that they have a voice again. So still doing in-person events in a safe way. Our Parks and Public Lands Department this past fall did a great engagement where they actually went out into the community, but they did what you call pedestrian intercepts, or just meeting people out in the parks to talk to them about what they liked and what they wanted to see improved. So still being able to engage, making sure that digital access is not a barrier, but going out and allowing people to participate in city decisions.
So it sounds like this team is going to be doing actually quite a bit of civic engagement work, and probably working very close with our civic engagement team to meet the people where they are. So thank you, Liz, for sharing that. And Mary, I'm sorry, did you have your hands raised?
I do, but it's kind of hard to see in the white bookcase corner there. I just wanted to mention that at the beginning of the pandemic, when we started doing PSAs on it, sometimes a daily basis and a weekly basis to get the health information out to the communities, we asked our city employees who had self-identified as speaking multiple languages to translate these PSAs. And we ended up doing 13 every single week with city employees. We didn't want to exhaust our employees in that way. So we've found a contract since, but it's one of my goals for 2021 for us to pursue a unified contract for translation and interpretation services, and for the city to enact a language access policy. It's not something we had before. It became blaringly evident how much we need it in 2020 with the pandemic and everything else. So we are hard at work on it. Innovation team certainly keeps that ball rolling, but know that our office is on it too.
Thank you so much, Mayor, for filling us in on that, and Liz for providing us with details. And we'll be on the watch. I mean, if people want to stay connected about what's happening with the city, I'm just going to go ahead and put a plug in for it now. But you can come visit our website at slc.gov. And let's talk a little bit more about some of the other areas of focus in addition to digital equity that the innovations team will be working on. So are there some other things that you've identified as challenges that your team will be focusing on? And I'll just throw this out to anyone on the team.
Well, I'll start us off. I want to make sure everybody else has a chance to talk. We talk about the big the big integrated system, the finance, human resources systems that we're working on. And I want to kind of stress the value of this big project is it resets the whole foundation for us. We talk about really want to make data-driven decisions. We really want to focus on transparency, and we do. And in order to get there, we really need to do this work and just reset that foundation, modernize that foundation. And the system, the core of the system we're working on is from 1993. We have 27 different systems that we've added on to the side of that, right? And so whenever you do that, you have unique structures and you have unique terms and processes, and it really is time to just sort of reset that foundation. And I think that's why this project's so important for us.
For everybody who's not software oriented, one of the ways that they explained it to me to make more sense, and being somebody who lives in an old house in Salt Lake City, our houses sometimes reflect this. That 1993 system, is it 23 or 27 additional layers?
27.
27 layers of other disparate systems, never meant to talk to each other, layered year after year upon one another. And so there's, people ask us, like, why doesn't the data in this department talk to the data over here? You could use this to inform this kind of decision making. Undoing that whole system across all of the departments of the city and putting in this new integrated software it's been needed for decades. It's been needed for many administrations, and it's going to happen. And we have this team, we have the city council support and their engagement, and it will happen. So the potential for the city to use not only the data that we collect on a day-to-day basis, but be able to fix things, streamline things, have far less duplication of effort across the city. It's tremendous. We can't really even say all that it will be able to do, but we know it's incredible.
We're just really trying to get up to speed with today's technology, which we know technology is always ever evolving. So once you bring us up to speed, right, innovation team, it's still going to be an ongoing effort to make sure things are talking to each other. So now let's talk, are there other challenges and things that you'll be working on and addressing, and like, what are some of your priorities for the first few months here?
So I'll chime in here. There's with that software implementation that we're working on, there's two areas that are really propelling us along. And like I mentioned in my introduction, one of our colleagues is working on is the business process realignment, is trying to get all of the city's processes streamlined. And working together with when we actually choose a vendor and what have you, making sure that everything is efficient and not duplicative. And we're doing that by documenting what we have. We need to understand, where we are now, right? We need to understand who we are as a city, how we've been doing our processes, and then that way we can actually align them, make them more efficient and streamline. I can't speak to it as well as our colleagues, so apologies for that. But the other, I wouldn't call it a challenge, but it's exciting because we're bringing something pretty new to the city, which is this idea of organizational change management. And it's a term people are like, what's that? Well, what's going on? I mean, basically change management initially started out as a business concept back in the 90s, based on the belief that organizational change doesn't just happen by chance, right? If you want a group of people to change, you can't just tell them to do it and they'll do it. We know that doesn't work. Instead, change management as an idea believes that change could be a structured process that can be guided by deliberate actions. This has since morphed out of the boardroom and into the halls of government, as the public sector began to see the benefits of this approach to its own change initiatives. And we know government is constantly changing because their people are changing. Cities are growing. There's new challenges now that cities have to tackle, so they have to change. Salt Lake City recognized this. It recognized that we need to change how we provide services in order to better serve its residents by streamlining processes, eliminating waste, increasing transparency, all the fun government jazz words. And implementing this new software system that we're working on was just one example of this change. It's a big change, though. It will require heavy lifting from multiple departments. And, you know, the city could have just done what a lot of organizations do, which is just get a technology and say, hey, do it. But instead, city leadership, you know, Mayor Mendenhall, she wanted to focus, how can we successfully get this change through? So we were thinking, you know, we need to focus on the people side of change. This is, you know, what's at the core of change management, really. Because at the end of the day, if individuals don't change and, you know, if we're not using the systems correctly, then we just wasted all this money on this new system. And so, right, like with change management, it's really about supporting a change initiative by focusing on the individuals who need to actually carry out the change. And by applying a change management lens to large transformational projects, the city increases the chances of successful adoption by working with individuals, and in this case, city employees, to help them better understand this change. We can, you know, mitigate risks and ensure proper training when it comes. Without a dedicated change strategy in place, most transformational projects are destined to fail, and really will end up costing taxpayers, which no one really wants, right? So, I mean, it's really exciting to bring this to Salt Lake City because the concept of change management is new to the city. And really it's catching on in the government, you know, sector. So hopefully, I mean, you can call it innovative. So it's exciting. Yeah, so it's something that we're trying to tackle and apply to all city projects going forward.
Thank you, Sandy. And with this change management, and I'm wondering with the team here, is there some kind of an example that you could give us of like how we're doing this type of work? I mean, are we talking about mostly in internal changes, or are there external changes happening up front? Maybe you're working towards that. Can you kind of walk us through this process slightly? Like, you know, are you focusing more internal, moving to external? What can the residents expect?
Initially, we're really focusing internally on change. You know, the example that we've given is when we've developed technology in the city in the past, we've said, okay, well, how do you do it? Or how do you like to do your job? And then we try to build a system to accommodate that. And that's where you start getting all of these sort of unique personalities in the work that we've developed over time. As you modernize systems and you move to, you know, software as a service is the platforms that we will be using. We need to start adapting best practices, right? And so how does this process happen universally, right? And how do we maintain those consistencies across the city? And so it really has to happen internally first for us to do that. And so we will. I feel like over time, yes, the public's going to see. We've got a couple of smaller projects that are about ready to launch. You'll see some new user interfaces happening, and I think one of the areas that we want to start focusing is sort of our policy around like the citizen experience, right? The customer experience when they come to the city, right? We've always allowed those to be very independent as well, and we haven't really sort of establish some baselines on what that is. And so we'll start working on that. It'll take us a little while to get all of that done, but at least start establishing some of those standards. And that's where you'll start seeing that public face come. The new systems will absolutely have a public face to them. And so that will shift as well.
No, and maybe Liz, you can even speak to this as well too, but is there like a snapshot or something that you could give us on kind of how your team's work and efforts are going to help the city, like help function better for not only employees, but also for residents in the city?
So the mayor gave a great example of issues we have with our current finance and HR system, that it's old and there have been layers upon layers built upon it. So right now, sometimes basic city functions, it takes a lot of staff time to devote to that, just to working within that system. So by implementing this new software system that is much more modern, staff time will actually be able to be devoted to more things that are much more public facing to constituents, and so we can address other issues. Once we have this problem solved, that way we can go on and address other issues that are facing the constituents. Some other projects that you'll be seeing coming up really soon is we're about to launch our next resident survey. And what's really great about this is we talked to, working with a company, Y2 Analytics, we talked to residents from across Salt Lake City, from districts 1, 2 to 6, 7, and everywhere in between. And what's great is we identify those high priorities from our residents. How do they see the city is doing overall? What issues do they have with specific city services? And that can really help drive what the mayor is seeing out there, helping her with developing her priorities, and also helping with the city budget. So that's something that you'll be seeing actually launched in the next month.
Over the years, as we've done those surveys and looked at the feedback from residents, or if you just participate in your community council and you hear the kind of feedback that comes from, whether it's a developer that wants to do a project in the neighborhood, or people who want to get their curb and gutter replaced to be ADA accessible, there's a theme sometimes that the right hand might not know what the left hand's doing. And that if the city could just work together better, then, we could eliminate not only a lot of inefficiency, but frustration and work for the public in terms of having to talk, sometimes tell the same story across a number of different departments or offices in the city. So I'm not saying we're going to solve all of those problems in one fell swoop, but this patchwork of systems that does not talk to one another and doesn't integrate is partially perpetuating that siloed experience. So think of the innovation team. Right now, we're talking about this system-wide software, helping the right and the left hand know what each other are doing, but it's bigger than that. And the opportunity to I think continuously have feedback from the community about what the experience is with the city beyond as it relates to this software is going to come to this team right here. And we're going to be able to break down some brick walls that I think have been there since the beginning.
And thank you, Mayor. And in terms of, and Liz, you kind of mentioned this too, but for community feedback, as we're collecting this stuff, as the public is going through the process, like I'm just going to give you an example, events permitting or something like that. If there are some like issues or things that the public might have some feedback on, is there a way we're capturing that information, and where can we send people to? It may not be set up now, but can you give us a little bit of a plug here as to where people should look for that information?
Yeah, so the innovation team, we have a website. It is it's within our great department, the IMS department, but you can find that basic information. But this is really just the start. We're launching right now, but as projects get going and you can see progress, we're going to be showing project metrics up on that website. So that's specifically for the innovation team. But you know what? The city has a great way to participate. If you go to the city website, slc.gov, there off the main page, there's this site called Feedback Community, and it's run by our great engagement team. And that's a central place where you can go for projects that are happening that they're seeking feedback on. So anytime you want to participate or you want to learn more about how to be involved more in these projects, visit the feedback community page, and you can sign up. And any time that there is a public outreach opportunity, you can be notified of that, and you can help participate in city decisions.
Thank you, Liz. That's super helpful. And we can probably pop that information into the comment box on Facebook, and we will share more information as it comes online on slc.gov. You can follow SLC Gov on social media here on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we'll make sure that updated information about our new innovation team will be on there. Now, we've talked a little bit, we've learned a little bit about your role, what you're doing, how you're planning to do those things. Let's talk about measuring success now. Mayor, I'd love to turn it over to you for a second. And how will you measure the success of this major city project?
We will the same way that we measure all of our success, which is putting our goals out there publicly and then holding ourselves accountable to them every year. We did that in 2020 as a new administration. We gave ourselves basically a report card back in January as we wrapped up 2020. What a year that was, and everything that we'd set out and said we were going to do at the beginning of the year didn't account for any of the surprises or the critical things that came up. But still, and no matter what happens, we're going to do that. So I think it's important for us at this, especially at this local level, to be clear not only of what we say we're going to do, but whether or not we do it and what that impact is and how people can see it in the community. So we will do that again this year, and the innovation department will be reflected in the work and the accountability that we put out there.
Thank you, Mayor. And it looks like we're getting some questions that are coming through now on Facebook. So I am going to I'm going to turn it over to that time now. But for everyone watching, again, continue to send us your questions. You can drop it down below in the comment box, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. And let's go ahead and the first question here is from Scott on Facebook, and he wants to know, will you use technology to bring your departments speaking with one another and coordination on issues like homelessness, or a one call that's all to report problems that go to the police and health department?
Liz, well, I'll get it started. A big part of it, we have more going on, I guess, than what we've talked about. Another area where we are is sort of our constituent response, and that, I talked a little bit about the citizen experience. When we started this project, we all kind of got to pick some pet projects to keep us from going too crazy, just focusing on the financial and HR systems. And so Liz picked constituent management, and we have a pretty good platform in place now, but that's an area where we really want to start seeing that improvement. And we've got a pretty good plan coming together on how we take us to a next level. Liz, in her role as working for HAND, was our homeless services coordinator. And so we have a lot of history there. And maybe I'm speaking too much for Liz, and she wants to jump in on this, but I feel like we're in some good hands here and going to see some progress.
And if I can just add, we have a great group in the city that gets together and discusses homeless services and improving homeless services. And they really try to blend that technology piece with service to the community. So there are several ways right now that if people have concerns on homeless services, they can actually reach out to the city. It's through the SLC mobile app. And also they can reach out directly to the mayor's office, city council member as well. And what happens is that all of these questions and concerns, they're actually filtered, and it's technology on the back end, but through SLC mobile and another software program we use, it actually gets to this group that comes together once a week, and they identify those areas, these questions and concerns that are coming in. And so that way they can coordinate amongst themselves how best to answer those, and to say maybe work with our health department and public safety, and also our service providers, and trying to go and address some of those questions and concerns. So really, technology is a great asset, but it's not the only answer. It's really part of a larger response on how we meet constituent requests.
Thank you, Liz. Mayor?
I know this isn't the one call for everything, but I just want to take the chance to put out there the number. If anyone needs to connect someone with services, see someone who needs some outreach help, that number is 801-990-9999. And that that number will connect anyone with an intake specialist. And then we're going to put into the chat somewhere the link to the dashboard, the homeless dashboard, which is not only about how to get into services or how to get transportation or a place to store your stuff, but it also has that virtual map that shows where we're getting those calls for service through the mobile app, for whether it's bio waste or other services that are needed for individuals. You can look at that there.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm moving along here real quick with, we've got a few questions that trickled in, so I want to try and get to them here before the end of the hour here. So the second question, in 2020, we saw projects like Rose Park Connect and SLC Wi-Fi Connect come online to help people further access the internet. What does the future of this look like for Salt Lake City?
I'll take this on. We're hoping to just continue this growth, right? We've got some benches that are in our Parks warehouse right now that we're going to start putting into some of the public spaces that'll be a public open Wi-Fi hub. You know, the area we can work in largely is the public spaces, right? We can't broadcast necessarily into private spaces. So that's our objective. We're meeting with providers now to talk about how we power up and boost our signals within our public spaces, and then broadcast outward, and working to identify that. So we're going to continue to do that. And then, you know, in line with sort of the values of the policy, how do we work with the providers to get them to make the accessibility to home connections even more affordable? How do we minimize some of those barriers? We find sometimes that some of the programs they offer have a lot of hurdles, right? And how do we get through those hurdles? The library started a program this year, the Digital Navigators, and a big part of the Digital Navigators program is helping people get connected, right? It's helping people get connected. At Sorensen, we've got a similar program where people can call in, and we're trying to make those resources really available. So this will be a continuous effort. I mean, until we see, I think, the final, which is, you know, the internet as a utility, right? It's got that loose definition that isn't a utility yet, and so that sort of ubiquitous coverage isn't a requirement yet. But I think 2020 told the story that, you know, it's a utility. It's something we all need.
Thank you, Nolan. It's definitely going to take this team, right, to help address some of those issues. And speaking of the team, now we do have a question that's come in from Jenny on Facebook. And she said, you know, it was mentioned earlier that there are 4 members on the team, but only 3 are presenting. Who is the secret, you know, 4th member? So Sandy, I want to turn this one over to you. Can you tell us the name of the person who is our 4th person who couldn't join us today?
Her name is Alyssa. And yeah, she's been working with us on the ERP team, and she's been great. She's carried out some major projects with the public services team for a couple of years now. So she's got great experience in special projects, and yeah, we're excited to have her. I've been working with her on the ERP, and I'm excited to work with her going forward.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Glad that we got to shed some light on our good old friend Alyssa here. Now, one more question that's come through is, what are the models from other cities or entities that Salt Lake City is using to develop the scope and approach of the innovation team?
I think there's a handful of, you'll see innovation departments in other cities. You've also seen offices of new urban mechanics that happen within other cities. I see us as a sort of a hybrid of those. I don't want to get too government wonky on you there, but typically what you see in these other work groups is you have a team of people that understand policy development. You know, as you can see, we have a strong understanding of constituent relations through our engagement work, through managing those things and having a good, strong connection to the community. And then testing those pieces so that we can influence the bigger organizational change. Our team can't do everything, but it really, you know, those other innovation offices that you may see in cities, or that concept of the new urban mechanics, where you have a safe place to try new things. And that's where we will become.
Mayor?
I'll also mention that there are there's some innovation think tank type organizations out there that we're I know this team's tapped into, and I've been interested in, which led to my desire to create a team like this for Salt Lake City. One of those is at Harvard, and they do some incredible work on mobility, increasing mobility for BIPOC communities. I know our economic development team is also looking at some of that work, but from sort of an academic and a think tank side, those are all streams we're plugged into. And we invite you as our public to share with us great articles or references that you come across of the way that innovation is changing cities around the world that you think you want to share with us. We appreciate that. You can send them to the mayor's office email or to the innovation team. I think there's some contacts on the landing page website that Liz referenced.
Thank you, Mayor. And, as we're wrapping up and nearing the hour here, end of the hour, Mayor, let's chat here a little bit about what your hopes are for this team.
Well, I don't want to scare them away, but they're pretty huge hopes for this team because of the siloed nature of so much of government. And like I said at the beginning, you couple that with the fact that we have some of the most incredible, brilliant, and altruistically dedicated people who work for this capital city. Their opportunity to be catalytic in the way that the city serves our residents and solves problems it's tremendous. And the needs are incredible, and they're growing all of the time. And you've seen from the different backgrounds, even Sandy has an incredible international political lens that she brings to all of our work at City Hall. Liz helped guide the community conversations through one of the hardest things we've been through, which was citing homeless resource centers and, making community systems that help them to be successful and to support the communities. These are not easy conversations, and we have incredible team members who, with a diversity of experience, are going to be able to change the way the city literally works. We had to do it in 2020 because of a pandemic and earthquake and some other things, but we want to do it in perpetuity. We want these folks from a business jargon side. Disruption is a really good thing, and disruptions to technology and the way things happen, those are where we make the biggest strides of progress. That's where we can. So these, as I said, I think are good disruptors to the city. We want them to look with questioning eyes on the way that we operate. And when something doesn't work very well, this is our crack team who's able to open their great minds and bring new ideas, not just best practices. I think you're going to see new best practices come out of Salt Lake City because of the progressive work that they're about to do.
Thank you, Mayor. You do have some high hopes for this team, and that's an amazing thing. And you know what? It may have taken 2020 to boost and amplify all of this, but now this team is gonna run on that bandwagon. So that's a good thing. Now, team, just as we close here in the last minute, are there any final takeaways that any of you would like to share as we wrap up? Anything you'd like to share with the public?
I'll just say thanks for the opportunity. We're excited. We've got more than we can do, and so we're going through that prioritization. But just thanks for the opportunity. We're anxious to do it.
Thank you so much, team. Thank you, Mayor, Sandy, Noel, and Elizabeth, and Alyssa. We missed you. But thank you all so much for your time and effort. We're so excited to see what's ahead for the innovation team. And for those out there, thank you again so much for joining us and leaving some comments and questions for us. If you want to stay connected with the innovation team, please do so by visiting our website, slc.gov. Shortly today, we'll be sharing a press release with more information about the team and how to stay connected. And you can also continue to follow us here on Facebook, as well as Twitter and Instagram at SLC.gov. And we're also on Nextdoor and Reddit. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we appreciate y'all.